He's always trying to put the people around him in the best position to succeed. And he's pretty successful at it. Even though the team gets relegated in the season finale, lots of people, whether it's Roy, Sam, Nate, Keeley, Rebecca, or even Higgins, pretty much everyone is in a better place by the end of the season than they were at the beginning, largely because of Ted's influence. And that comprehensive strategy is no accident. The approach that we see Ted use to get the best out of the people around him goes back to an idea developed by Abraham Maslow called the hierarchy of needs. It looks like this, and basically, the hierarchy of needs is a pyramid that visually represents the layers of someone's psychological needs and desires. John Wooden's pyramid of success, which incidentally Ted has framed in his office, works pretty much the same way, just in a more sports-specific context. There is that if any needs aren't being met lower down the pyramid, then the stuff at the top will suffer. So if we're thinking about self-actualization like sports performance, which in this context we should, then not having a safe home life, or a solid group of friends around you, or even something like food scarcity, would impact an athlete's ability to perform. And that plays itself out almost immediately in Ted Lasso, because when we first meet everyone's favorite Nigerian, Sam Obisanya, he's not having a super great time. His performances in training and in matches apparently haven't been very good up to the point that Ted gets there, and his confidence is struggling. Some of that might have something to do with getting consistently bullied by Jamie Tart, but in any case, Sam seems to be making a lot of mistakes. And Ted, sensing that the problem probably goes deeper than Sam just not being any good, gives him the iconic advice to be a goldfish. Basically, Ted is determined that one of Sam's problems is ruminating on the mistakes he's made. We also learn in that episode that this is Sam's first time living away from Nigeria, and that he's homesick. On the hierarchy of needs pyramid, that falls squarely into the love and belonging category, which will surely cause some problems if the lack of confidence doesn't. But even though, for obvious reasons, Ted can't send Sam back to Nigeria, he does the best thing he can think of to help Sam feel at home in his new club. He throws him a birthday party, and almost immediately, Sam's performances improve. Ted's relationship with his boss, Rebecca, works in much the same way. When we meet Rebecca, her whole goal is essentially to tank the team on purpose, which sounds pretty unsympathetic. But we learn pretty early on that she's only doing it to get back at her now ex-husband, who is a big old jerkface, like the biggest. And even though she projects a pretty badass image to the people around her, we learn over the course of the season that that experience has understandably shaken her. Her esteem and her need for love and belonging have both taken a serious hit from how Rupert, the jerkface, treated her. And a lot of the bad treatment she dishes out to the people closest to her stems from that pain. And Ted, who is going through a heartbreaking divorce himself, steps in, along with Keeley and Higgins, to help fix things lower down the pyramid, and to remind Rebecca that she is one, not alone, and two, the right person to lead Richmond going forward, no matter what stupid Rupert says. For a coach like Ted Lasso, bringing someone who's feeling down on themselves back up is sort of in the wheelhouse. That's what humanism is all about, and it's the kind of culture that Ted spends the whole season building. But what does humanism have to say about someone whose self-esteem is already unbelievably, nearly impossibly high? That's exactly the kind of character we're introduced to with Jamie Tart, who his teammate, Roy, describes pretty consistently as a prima donna. Plummeting towards relegation, Jamie still feels the need to make everything about him. And that makes him the perfect foil for Coach Lasso. Whereas Jamie's ego is absolutely enormous, Trent Crimm's article tells us that Ted doesn't have an ego at all. Jamie is all about his own performance, but Ted can only focus on how it impacts the collective. Jamie doesn't form deep connections to the people around him, but that's kind of Ted's whole thing. And Ted, along with the audience, realizes that his approach could actually help Jamie out a lot, even if he can't see it. Getting through to Jamie is sort of Ted's white whale throughout Season 1, because if he can figure out how to do that, then the rest of the team's dynamic can just kind of fall into place. And as we get to the end of Season 1, we start to get some clues that things aren't perfect in Jamieland. No, emotionally. His volatility causes real problems within the team from the first episode. But in episode 6, we learn that Jamie's relationship with his father may be a big part of what's behind that. We get that anecdote where he talks about how if he didn't dominate, his dad would call him soft. And even though he's lived up to that by making himself as good and as tough as possible, he's kind of lost who he was in the process. We also see his dad verbally abusing him in the last episode after Man City beats Richmond. And through those interactions, we learn that Jamie's machismo and narcissistic tendencies may be covering up for something that he feels very vulnerable about. Something further down the hierarchy of needs than anything we've seen so far. And Ted is aware of all this too, and as the layers of Jamie begin to unfold, Coach Lasso just becomes more and more determined to bring him over to the light side. As is Ted's nature, he believes in his player to a fault, and will do whatever he can to ensure that Jamie becomes the footballer and the man that Ted sees in him. And does his strategy work?